1, 2, mic check. 1, 2. Check 1, 2, mic check. Check 1, 2, mic check. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, mic check. 1, 2, mic check. 1, 2, mic check. 1, 2.
Okay.
Check, 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 check. 1, 2, mic check. Check 1, 2. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. Well, I think it's being run off of this, but I can get you a clicker real quick for this PC. Oh, no, no, no. We'll get you a clicker. If you'd like to hook that on your belt and go ahead and when we get it hooked up, you can turn it on at that point. Go ahead and get you reverse this clip. And then actually, sorry about that. Better. All right, when you turn that on, let's give it a quick test. This one's slightly different.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello. Hi, Randy. Does that sound okay? I can't hear a thing. Okay. Is it good? Okay.
Test. Brad has pants on. What's up, Kyle? Hi, Dr. Fridge. Do you need anything? Need me to take attendance screens? Anything? Yeah, I don't know why it's not. Okay. This is not QED. But it could be. But it could be. You grab some chairs, Spencer. I'm gonna bring a chair right here.
The question or anyone else needs to be talking into a microphone.
Okay. Okay.
Sound good?
All right. Okay. So we definitely need.
To appoint a wrangler.
Okay. So can you help distribute microphones? Okay. Yeah. When it's question time, because it's not going to get picked up on the audio otherwise. I can get. We got two microphones.
Yes.
I can get. You want to help? We got wranglers right here. Pass them around. And then so this one.
Hi, guys.
Dave and Joanne.
Not since last night. No. I Combed it.
150, maybe
Does
that's.
that help?
I'm
Combed
just,
my
I'm
hair.
so used to seeing you on a television screen, I can't
Uh,
believe 159.
and I think that 159, I think that, I told Cheryl, I think that 10 pounds, bunch of crowd is like 80 pounds. I was like, who was the fat dude on TV? And then I realized it was me.
You looked great. You're so funny.
Good afternoon, fellow UNT staff members. Welcome to this town hall meeting on the topic of Senate Bill 11, also known as the Campus Carry Law. Can y'all hear me okay back there? It just doesn't seem like it. Okay, thank you. I'm Don Noska, Administrative Coordinator for the Department of Audiology and Speech Language Pathology, and I'm your staff Senate rep on the task force. I'd like to begin by introducing the other task force members in attendance, and if you'll raise your hands when I call your name. Eric Fritsch, Professor and Chair of the Department of Criminal Justice and Chair of the task force. Darlene Callahan, Director of Space Management and Planning. Darlene here? Okay, there she is. Mo McGinnis, Dean of Students. Brandy Renton, HR Director for UNT Denton. Ed Reynolds, Chief of Police. Congrats. Brad Scott, Risk Management Director. Ronaldo Stowers, Senior Associate General Counsel for UNT System. And Elizabeth Wiss, Vice President for Student Affairs. This past summer, President Smotrisk appointed reps from amongst the faculty, staff, and student body to form a task force charged with reviewing the recently passed state law, commonly known as Campus Carry, and making recommendations for what will become the official policy of the university. And the task force has also been charged with developing means of two-way communication with the campus community. To that end, we have several town hall meetings scheduled over a 2-week period to allow faculty, staff, and students, including those primarily located at Discovery Park, to ask questions of and share concerns with the task force. A website has also been created that contains some frequently asked questions, and we'll continue to add to that site as the process continues. It's campuscarry.unt.edu. The task force has a brief presentation on the Campus Carry Law. We ask that you hold all questions until the end. Presentation will begin in just a moment. Dr. Fritsch.
All right. Well, can y'all hear me in the back? First and foremost, thanks for coming. Just a couple things real quick. This is being live video streamed, and then we're going to, well, I guess it is being recorded, but we're going to save it, and then we'll post it onto the Campus Carry website so that other members of the committee that are not, I feel like I'm echoing, other members of the committee that are not here can view it, but also other staff members and really anybody throughout our community that wants to view what transpired today and the thoughts and questions that you had can be sent out to them as they have time to review it. Also, we are also recording it so that we can go back and review it and make sure that we have people's comments correctly, because I don't want you to think, well, we're telling him stuff, but he's not writing anything down. Because I don't want to be writing stuff while we're talking at the same time, but we will transcribe it so we get the notes, etc. So, as Don introduced me, I'm Eric Fritsch, Chair of the Campus Carry Task Force. I'm also a professor and chair in the Department of Criminal Justice here at the University of North Texas. Been here 19 years. And what we're going to do today is kind of give you a presentation on the Campus Carry Law, CHL holders, data on CHL holders, what the expected impact is on the Campus Carry Law on this campus, and then kind of open it for questions, comments, responses, and dialogue amongst ourselves. So this is the overview of what we're going to do. We've already introduced the task force members in attendance, but we will overview the campus carry law requirements. I want to make sure that first and foremost that everyone's been exposed to what the actual legal requirements are that are facing UNT once we implement this law and it becomes effective August 1 of 2016. It does apply specifically to CHL holders or concealed handgun license holders in the state of Texas. So we'll talk a little bit about what the requirements are and how you go about getting a CHL. And then we'll also present some data on Texas CHL holders. The Texas Department of Public Safety kind of keeps track of them and also keeps track of any criminal activity they participate in. So we will talk about that. And then lastly, we'll talk about the impact that we at least foresee this having on UNT and then the role of the task force. So, Campus Carry Law Requirement Senate Bill 11. So it's referred to as Senate Bill 11. Became effective, signed into law by Governor Abbott, but becomes effective August 1, 2016. And so just to kind of give you a brief overview of our role is that President Smotrzyk has appointed a 23-member task force, representatives from really all walks of our community. So faculty, staff, and students are on the committee. So we have the Student Government Association, we have the Graduate Student Council represented, we have Staff Council represented, we have Faculty Senate represented, and then we have Dean of Students, obviously the Police Chief, we have Risk Management, we have myself, we have Provost Finley Graves on the academic side of things. So we have we have housing involved, so we have a full breadth and depth of people that one, have knowledge about this, but also are going to be impacted by this. And our role is to draft a policy, the campus carry policy for UNT that will be then given to President Smotrzyk in the middle of December. And we'll talk a little bit about that process, but that's why we are here. That's what we're tasked with doing. And part of this process is what I refer to as a consultative process. So we're reaching out to these town hall meetings to get input from, in this case, staff on what they want to see in the campus carry law, what their concerns are, what the issues we need to make sure that we address as a committee, et cetera. So we're going to take that all into consideration as we draft this policy. We haven't done much as a committee. We've met 3 times. We have basically focused on getting a website up and some frequently asked questions that we keep hearing answered on the website, and getting the task force members' names and getting a web form up so that you can then share your thoughts through a web form and through also an email address if you prefer that, which is just campuscarry@unt.edu, and then really planning for these forums. So we don't have the list of gun-free zones that we'll talk about. We don't have any of that drafted as of yet because we want to hear from you. So what we're going to start with is, what does the law require? That's going to be really hard because of the shape of this room to see that. So I'll probably do maybe a little more reading of the slides than I normally would. But basically the first bullet point says that the Texas legislature has explored campus carry in previous legislative sessions. So they've looked at it before. It's never been passed. Obviously this legislative session, it was passed by the legislature, signed into law by Governor Abbott, and basically what it allows is this. So we use the term campus carry. So it allows concealed handgun license holders, so what we just refer to as the acronym of CHL. So CHL holders to carry their handguns on campus at UNT and other institutions of higher education throughout the state. Once the law becomes effective, which it becomes effective August 1 of 2016. So the policy we're building, the draft we're building goes to the president, then it goes to the Board of Regents, They're meeting in February of 2016. Then we will have basically 6 months or however long that is to then really plan for the implementation of the law. So it does not take effect until August 1, 2016. And there's sometimes confusion we've heard between the concept of campus carry and what is known as open carry. Campus carry is going to be allowed on this campus August 1 of 2016. And that applies specifically to concealed handguns and to concealed handgun license holders. Open carry is basically like exposed handguns like you see on a police officer. Open carry becomes effective in this state as well. There's a spot on the slide for that in January of 2016, but it specifically excludes institutions of higher education. So UNT is going to be a campus carry environment. It will not be an open carry environment. So there will be no exposed handguns on campus. And as it says there in bold, which I think is very important for everybody in this room, is that, you know, we have a charge as a committee of what to do. And the bottom line is, coming from the president, is that UNT is going to abide by the requirements of the law. There's been some talk and some chatter, and we've gotten some feedback regarding the web form that we should fight this, that we should not allow guns on campus. That is not an option, okay? The legislature has already made that statement that handguns are going to be allowed on this campus August 1, 2016. So as I've said several times, and I guess I'll just keep saying it because it seems to keep making the newspaper, but that ship has sailed, all right? That's not what we're here to discuss. Should we have campus carry or not? The answer is we are having campus carry. The discussion then becomes, how do we craft the policy to best meet the needs of the university community? So, the first bullet point is basically a repeat of what's already been said, but again, I put it in there again to re-emphasize that once the law becomes effective, this law, campus carry, allows for concealed handgun license holders, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a little bit, that they may carry a concealed handgun on or about their person on campus. It also allows UNT to restrict certain areas from campus carry. So what we will refer to as quote-unquote gun-free zones. That's not what they're called in the law. That's just what people are commonly referring to them as. So we are allowed to craft in our policy what will be gun-free zones. That is, places in which people with concealed handgun license can't carry on campus. Couple rules regarding that. One, we have to give them effective notice. So we have to give them effective notice that they cannot carry their concealed handguns in this particular location on campus. And two, we can't make the gun-free zones so broad that it nullifies the law, because the legislation specifically states that. You as a university have some local control to establish some gun-free zones, areas where guns, even with CHO holders, won't be allowed. But you cannot make them so broad that it nullifies the law. The example I give is classrooms. We've kind of kept track of a little bit of what other universities are doing. Some are talking about, well, we just won't allow them in classrooms. Well, that's not going to be allowed. It actually violates the law because it basically nullifies the law, because it does not allow a CHO holder then to go to class. Whether that CHO holder is a student or a faculty member or anybody else, it doesn't allow them to go to class. And so that's what I mean by too broad. So, after consulting with students, faculty, staff, employees, the president in the end, he is the boss, so the president in the end is going to establish the rules regarding carrying concealed handguns on campus by license holders. So our responsibility as the task force is to draft a policy that will go to him basically middle of December, December 15th. The process is this, is that he then can make any changes that he see fit to the draft policy, and then it goes to the Board of Regents for approval at their February 2016 meeting. So it's kind of a three-step process. We get feedback from the university community, we draft the policy, we send it to the president, and then the president sends it to the Board of Regents. Also, the law specifically allows us to establish rules regarding the storage of handguns in campus housing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And again, in bold, put it in bold at this slide, just a couple things I want to make sure that I reemphasize, that this law does not take effect until August 1, 2016. So we have time to, one, enact a policy, and then two, put into place the appropriate measures to make sure that we're in compliance regarding the implementation of that policy. This is just the effective notice. So this is what it will look like, but it basically says, you know, you cannot carry a concealed handgun on this premise. So if it's a building, if it's a portion of a building, if it, wherever it happens to be, there will be an effective notice that is given. We have to do that by law. So these signs will go up on wherever the list of gun-free zones that are decided upon. These notices will go up on those buildings or those locations. So as I said, the kind of the three-step process, us as the committee, consultative process with the university community, drafts a policy, sends it to the president. President then makes modifications, sends it to the Board of Regents, and then the Board of Regents is meeting in February 2016, and that's when we're slotted to have the board review our policy. They, in the end, are the decision makers, and as it says, they may vote to amend the rules, so they may amend what we have recommended or what the president has recommended, and if amended, their provisions are final. So they are the final decision maker on our campus carry policy on campus. Couple of just procedural things. We obviously have to publish and distribute the policy to staff, students, employees, faculty, etc. We have to publish it on our website as required by law. Plus, beginning September 1, 2016, and then every 2 years thereafter, we have to submit a report to the legislature that basically says these are the areas on our campus that are gun-free, and this is why. So we have to justify every location. So we have to be very strategic in how we identify those gun-free zones. Some additional information that I think is important for us to understand regarding campus carry is UNT cannot revoke the right of a CHO holder to carry on campus. We have no authority whatsoever to revoke someone's ability to carry on campus. That is the Texas Department of Public Safety's responsibility. They are the ones that do the suspensions and the revocations, and so we don't have any say in that. So that's one thing. Next thing is that once the law is effective, this is for concealed carry. So it will be a criminal act, and the UNT Police Department can be involved if somebody that is a concealed handgun license holder exposes their weapon in plain view. And that's going to be a criminal activity at that point in time. In addition, it will be a criminal activity if they go into a location where the effective notice has been placed. So you can't go into this building, they go into this building and they have a concealed handgun. That will be a criminal activity as well. As I already mentioned, there's a difference between campus carry and open carry, and there's some confusion sometimes between those two things. Open carry is kind of in a holster that's exposed, kind of, like I said, similar to what you see a police officer carrying. That is going to be in effect in Texas, so you will see it at the grocery store or whatever, beginning January 1, 2016. But it will not be allowed on campus, and the reason is because the law specifically excludes institutions of higher education from open carry. So open carry is not allowed. Campus carry is allowed on campus. And the last point before we move on to CHLs, but the last point is that UNT does not have the legal authority to require a CHL holder to self-identify. So we will not know who is a CHL holder and who is not. We do not have the legal authority. No one has the legal authority except, I suppose, the police to ask somebody to self-identify. Okay, so that's the requirement. So that's the parameters for what that's the parameters of what we're using to develop this policy. So, second thing we want to talk about before we start opening it up for questions and comments is what are the requirements to get a CHL? So what does it take to be a CHL concealed handgun license holder? First, you have to be 21 years of age. So it does not include certainly our student population and any of our employees that are under the age of 21. They have to pass classroom training, proficiency exam, they have to shoot their weapon, they have to take a written exam. All of their training must be completed by a certified instructor. And then basically, they can't be a criminal. And so I've used this term several times, but CHL holders are exceedingly law-abiding citizens. And why they are exceedingly law-abiding citizens is because they have to be to get the license. Because what this says is that to be eligible for a license, you can have never been convicted of a felony, never been convicted of a Class A or B misdemeanor in the last 5 years, not be currently charged with a Class A or B misdemeanor, or under felony indictment. So if you know about our levels of criminal activity, the only thing below any of that is a Class C misdemeanor, and that's basically a ticket. So anything above that, if you've done any of that, been charged with it, convicted, etc., there are rules in place that restrict you from getting a handgun license. And again, this is just kind of the broad stroke list of rules. There's actually even more detail than this, but just generally speaking, no felonies, no A's or B misdemeanor convictions in the past 5 years, and basically not under any criminal prosecution at the time. And then also, certainly, which would make sense, you're not a fugitive from justice. In addition to that, this gets a little bit smaller, but not a chemically dependent person, capable of exercising sound judgment with respect to the proper use and storage of the handgun, has not made any material misrepresentation on the application materials, and then the Texas Department of Public Safety conducts a background investigation. And then I put on their website, which what I do is this when I want to know about CHL is I just go into Google and I put Texas Department of Public Safety CHL or concealed handgun license, and it pulls up the website and it has all kinds of information. It has all the rules, because this is just 2 PowerPoint slides, but there's even substantially more detail on the eligibility of it. But here's what I'm trying to convey regarding presenting this information is that from Texas's perspective, and therefore from our perspective to you, is that CHL holders are exceedingly law-abiding citizens. They have to be to get the license, but then we really didn't talk about the revocation process. If they do anything that's criminal, then that license is revoked. So in order to keep it, they also have to continue to be non-criminals. What do we know about them? Well, the Texas Department of Public Safety has data available on their website. That's where this came from, on who has CHLs, how many type of people, et cetera, demographic characteristics, convictions, et cetera, and we'll go through a little bit of that. First thing is that when we talk about a population, about 3% of the Texas population has a CHL. So about 3% have a concealed handgun license. Most of those are older So 86% are over the age of 30, 2/3 of them are over the age of 40. So they have a tendency to be older. So more than likely, CHL holders on campus are probably going to be more faculty and staff than they are students, because students predominantly under the age of 30, one, they have to be 21 to get it. There's just not a whole lot of that demographic from an age perspective getting a CHL. But I've said now 3 times, exceedingly law-abiding. And really what we're trying to do is just provide you with data, with evidence of what we know about CHL holders. Texas Department of Public Safety tracks the criminal convictions of everyone in the state, but also then separates that out by CHL holders. And so this is 2013 data. Welcome to criminal justice. We usually run about 2 years behind on data, so I always got to tell my class that. We're a couple years behind. 2014 is not there, or at least it wasn't there a couple days ago when I checked the website. But basically what this says is that in 2013, we in this state had right at 51,000 criminal convictions. So that's everything, 51,000 criminal convictions. Of those 51,000 criminal convictions, 158 of them were CHL holders. So as it says there, 1/3 of 1%. So not likely to commit criminal activity. But the concern of people is this, is that we're going to have, this is what I've heard at least, is that we're going to have more violence because we have guns on campus. And so I put this together because in criminal justice, when we talk about crime, we usually talk about the Uniform Crime Reports and what the FBI puts together. And so when we talk about violent crime, we're usually talking about murder, sexual assault, robbery, and assault or aggravated assault. And so what this slide shows you are those offenses. 2013 total convictions for the state of Texas for murder, aggravated sexual assault and sexual assault, aggravated robbery and robbery, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, assault with bodily injury, and then terroristic threat. And so the total convictions in the state of Texas in 2013, I can't do that math in my head, I wrote it down right here, is 13,000. So this column right here adds up to 13,746 convictions for what we would refer to in criminal justice as violent crime. Of those 13,746, 31 of them were CHL holders, right? Again, exceedingly law-abiding, very unlikely for a CHL holder to commit a violent crime. Very unlikely for them to commit a crime, but even less so because this is 0.225% of the violent criminal convictions in the state were committed by a CHL holder. So, last slide, last set of slides talks about, okay, so what are we estimating the impact at UNT regarding this? So if we use that 3%, 3% of the Texas population has a CHL. If we just apply it to our 42,000 people, so about 37,000 students, about 5,000 employees, faculty, and staff, we would expect about 1,260 CHL holders to be on our campus, at our university, at some point in time. Residence halls specifically, most of the, about today, well, not about today, but in fall of 2015, 6,210 people are living in residence halls on campus. Most of those people are under 21 years of age. So about 500 of them are 21 or older. Therefore, they meet the very initial requirements for a CHL. They still got to do all the other stuff, like no felonies, no A, B misdemeanors, all that other stuff, but at least the minimum age requirement. And so since that previous slide with the bar graph showed 86% of CHL holders are over 30, we really don't expect to have very many people in our residence halls, very many students in our residence halls that are CHL holders that then are carrying on campus. Again, we can't require them to self-identify. We're trying to identify with the Office of General Counsel whether or not, for residence hall purposes and residence hall assignments, whether we are allowed to require them to self-identify, but we still don't have an answer to that. And campus carry's new. CHL is not. So concealed handgun licenses came into law in 1997 in this state. So since 1997, people have been able to get a concealed handgun. They just haven't been able to carry them into this building. And so we checked UNT PD records, and there's no cases since the concealed handgun license law took effect in 1997, in which basically someone with a concealed handgun has come onto campus. There's two statutes. One is the trespass, and then the other is the unlawful carrying of a weapon by a concealed handgun license holder. All right, so we don't have, so it's one more nugget of evidence that CHL holders are unlikely to violate the law, because we don't have any records of CHL holders that have existed since '97 coming onto this campus with their handgun. The last thing on this is that we are not alone. We are now the eighth state to have campus carry. They're listed on this PowerPoint slide. The one with the longest history is Colorado, so that's the one that I looked at because they've had it since 2003. So you're going on 12 years now of experience in Colorado. Colorado State University, large state university like us, over 30,000 students. They have had no reported incidents since 2003 of a CHL holder displaying, discharging a handgun, nothing. University of Colorado at Boulder, that's the big CU, so that's the big campus. They've had one incident, and that involved an employee at the dental school that was showing her handgun to a fellow employee and it accidentally discharged, and then she was fired. So 12 years of history at two large state institutions in another state, and really one event, we'll just call it that. So we're going to open it up here very quickly for questions and comments, but how do you stay informed? You know, we want this process to be, of developing this policy to be as transparent as possible. And so, like I said, we're videotaping all of these sessions. They're going to be posted online. We have a Campus Carry website that has an overview of what we're doing, talks about the law. It has a list of all 23 task force members on it. It has a list of frequently asked questions that we're going to continue to add to as we hear more things that we feel like we should just answer and put on the FAQ page. It has a web form where you can just fill out and give your comments. That is going to be accessible to all 23 members of the task force, those comments. So we plan on providing updates through the website, campuscarry.unt.edu, as we proceed along with what is transpiring with the committee. We have a very short time frame. We hand this off basically to the president in 2 months. So we'll be updating the website. You can share your thoughts through that web form. We also have an email, campuscarry@unt.edu that you can email to. Here's the deal. I realize that there's a lot of people in here. Not everybody feels comfortable raising their hand and standing up and talking into a microphone and telling us what you think. And so if you don't get to voice your opinion today and get to engage in the dialogue because you don't feel comfortable doing that, then do one of these two things. Send us an email. All 23 of us will get it, or fill out the web form and we will get that as well. All right. I'm done. Thank you for listening to the presentation, and now we're just going to open it up to questions, comments, anything we can answer. We got two microphone wranglers running around. You got to speak into the microphone so that it can be picked up onto the video/audio of the video. And then we have also people, if I'm not the best person to answer the question, then we may get Ed Reynolds, Chief of Police, or Mo McGinnis, or Elizabeth, or somebody involved to answer the question. So the time is now yours. You've listened to me talk, so I'm good. Over here.
Hi. I saw a lot of statistics on there about crime related to CHL holders, but I know that personally, my question would be, with all of the recent terrible news events that are happening, is how this policy that we put into effect on campus is going to affect, or is it going to affect, active shooter training to make students and staff members feel safe if, and God forbid, when that ever happened on our campus, because that will probably increase the number of other people who have guns on this campus. So there's a fear of mine for vigilante justice, even if people are registered CHL holders. Just more guns to me does not make me feel safer. So I was wondering if that was going to affect any active shooter training that we have on campus.
Do y'all want to take that, or you want me to? I heard the response last night. We did the student one, but they answered it, so we'll let them. We'll let. Yeah. He's in charge now.
No, every semester, can y'all hear me on this? Anything?
Should be live.
Throughout the semesters, we have different types of training that goes on. Active shooter training is one of them. Basically, it's a simple process we talk about. We can come to your department, whatever you need us to do. It's in conjunction with the risk management and the police department. Dean of students can be there as well. What else do we have? Safety and security seminar. How many have been to the safety and security seminar? Raise your hands. Yeah, we talk about this type of stuff in there as well. So we encourage everybody to come to that and talk about it. But whatever you need for us to do, to come and talk to you about these things, we're more than happy to do it. I mean, it's not a problem whatsoever.
And I would just offer from my standpoint, as could take my hat off and put my criminal justice professor hat on, is that when we talk about active shooters and we talk about campus carry, they're really two separate issues. There's no documented evidence of any active shooter ever, to my knowledge, being a CHL holder. And so because there's a perception among some people that this is going to lead to more violence on campus, which is why I presented those statistics. But active shooter type of training that's done, et cetera, risk management, UNTPD, Dean of Students, all actively involved in that. Campus carry will be trained as well. So there will be discussions of orientation. We talked about that last night, and that will be kind of integrated into the training. But really, they're two separate issues. When you look at the risk factors for active shooters, CHL holder isn't one of them.
Hey, Eric, there's one more thing. You can also go to the website. Do y'all have it on your website as well, or just ours? Okay. Emergency.unt.edu is a website. You can go in there. There's a link that says Get Prepared. You can go down there and have all different types of events, and there's a video on there, just a short video. It references back to the FBI guidance for active shooter situations. So get out, hide out, take out, run, hide, fight, those types of situations. But for something more specific for your department, we can come in and we can sit down and we can have that conversation.
Hi, I just wanted to know, when is it legal for a person with the CHL to actually draw their weapon? In what situations would that be appropriate?
You're up, Chief Reynolds.
Thank you, appreciate it. I knew I'd get up here eventually. So, for them to expose their weapon that they have concealed, it would have to be in a situation where they could show that they were in fear of their person or somebody else. So that's kind of the guidelines under Texas law. So it has to be in defense of their person or in defense of someone else.
So if that occurs, will you and the police department be investigating those situations to make sure that that was appropriate?
Every time. Yes, every time.
Thank you.
When we establish the gun-free zones, how will that be enforced? Will there be X-ray machines or metal detectors?
There will be no metal detectors.
No.
I can tell you that.
No, what we're required by law to do is to provide effective notice. So the notices will go on the buildings, if it's an entire building, or on the locations, if it's like a particular office or set of offices, suite of offices, there'll be an effective notice that tells people, kind of like you probably have seen before going into certain restaurants, et cetera. It'll be similar to that, but we will not have metal detectors.
I don't know if you've ever been to the state capitol, but when you go in there, there's two lines. There's a line for everybody to go through the metal detector, and then there's handgun license holder line. They don't go through the metal detector. That's just the state's view on the handgun law. But we do use metal detectors at certain high-risk events, so we require everybody to go through there. But from my perspective, that's not for the CHO holder. That's for someone that has a gun that doesn't have a license. So.
My question is, are the police allowed to ask for, to see the license? Like, is that permitted? Are you just allowed to do that? I
Yes.
don't know.
They're required to identify.
Yes, but we are not. So like me as a faculty member can't ask the student, before you come into my office, are you a CHO holder? I'm not allowed to do it.
But on the police,
They
I
are.
mean, everyone that's been through this training, they know that. That's been hammered in the training, is if a police officer asks for it, you have to give your handgun license and your driver's license. And I'm sure we got some CHO holders in this room that know that, can verify that, so.
I have a twofold question for UNTPD, actually. The hot topic is active shooter on campus. My question is, if there's a situation in a class that is gun-free, and so CHO holder cannot enter this area, whatever the area is, and there's an active shooter, can that CHO holder go and assist, be an extension of the law in that area? And if there was an active shooter on campus, how are CHO holders going to be identified so they're not shot by police officers or drawn on by police?
You're getting
Well,
all the questions.
That's a really
today.
good question, by the way. Are there any more questions? No. I'm kidding. First is, as a CHO holder, if you're in fear of your life, the Texas law has specifically spelled out that you can use deadly force to protect your life or protect someone else. So that's kind of the first part of it. Second part is there should be some training in your CHL class, I hope that there is, about if you're involved in an incident and the police show up, what you're supposed to do. If there's not, please let me know. I'd like to talk to your instructor. Because it's happened to police officers before where they're off duty and they get involved in something and then the police show up and all they see is someone with a gun, it can go south quick. So that's part of the training that should be occurring in the classes about when you see the police, you need to put your gun up, raise your hands up and all that so that you don't get mistakenly regarded as a bad guy. So, that answer your question? Thanks.
For the gun-free zone, say there is this on?
Yes, it is.
If there's an area, and we know there's active shooter, like I said, CHOs are law-abiding, they wouldn't be an extension of, but for some reason can't be a peace officer or whatever the case. Can they go, or would they be legally, I guess for law here, would they be legally held under court to be prosecuted for entering that gun-free zone, even if there's active shooters? Per se, if something's going on in that corner of the room, I have to stand back over here and kind of watch it happen.
One thing I've learned in my job is there's always a one-off. So I can't see if you went into a gun-free zone because there was a deadly situation and you got involved that the district attorney's office would ever prosecute anyone for that. In my mind, I can't see that would ever occur.
What steps are you discussing to protect students who may not be educated about gun safety in close living quarters? Meaning, what options are you talking about in the dorms? Are there going to be lockable cabinets, gun safes, things like that? And also, how are you coordinating with some of the major apartment complexes around campus to also ensure that students that are not as well educated about gun safety aren't endangering themselves?
So there's a subcommittee of the parent committee that's specifically looking at the housing piece on campus and whether or not, and there's several options in schools that have dealt with this before. Do they put a hotel type safe in each room for CHO holders so they have a place to secure it? Do they have a central location? I have some concerns with that if it's anywhere other than the police department. I don't really want it at the police department, let me say that, but that may be an option as well. So as far as the other apartment complexes, that's kind of a separate piece. but it's certainly something that we may need to discuss with Denton PD and their crime prevention efforts, is that as well. On the education side, I think there's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to do at orientation before fall of 16, and specifically talking about this, because it's going to be on everybody's mind. So we need to talk about those presentations and training and education, that there could be someone down the hallway that has a handgun. So.
Training and education piece. As Dr. First mentioned, you can't mention or ask if someone if they have a license when you're coming to your classroom, but I can't help but anticipate that happening just as part of the education process. Will the policy being created have any discussions of penalties for violating the rules? Penalties to staff and faculty for asking those questions or refusing refusing and asking them anyways?
We have asked, and when I say we have asked, the task force has asked the Office of General Counsel, which is certainly assisting us in drafting the policy, to basically include some discussion of like faculty, staff, employees, do's and don'ts. So what can you do and what can't you do? So the question was asked last night in the student forum, can a faculty member say that their classroom is a gun-free zone? And the answer is no. Unless it's on that list that is in the policy, it is not a gun-free zone. And so I think we need some language in the policy that provides us with guidance to what we as employees can and can't do, and then also what supervisors can't do. So I as chair can't say, well, okay, no guns on my hallway. And so I think it needs to be in policy and spelled out. To the second thing about violation, we have briefly discussed that in the committee, and it seems to, what I got responses from like Finley, who obviously runs the academic side of things, is that really we don't need a separate, these are the sanctions for violating this policy, because there's already policies in place that talk about this is what happens when you violate any UNT policy. So we probably won't have any language about violating this policy, because it sounds to me that's covered in other areas of our policy manual.
I have another follow-up question, actually. Oh.
I apologize. The policy specifically called for a weapon to be on or about a person.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to travel to a gun-free zone, will staff and faculty be required to return a weapon to their vehicle or home before traveling to that space, or will they be able to store the weapon at their desk or space?
Do you want to answer that? I mean, I have a thought, but I don't.
I mean, I think you bring up a good point that we need to look at in the committee, because that's a really good question. There won't be gun lockers in every building for you to put your weapon in there. So I would hope that faculty and staff, once it's established, would know where they can and can't carry a weapon. And probably the best place to store it will be in your vehicle if you're going into one of those locations.
Right. But that is a very good question, because on or about your person. And so can you leave it in your office and then go over to the gun-free zone? Perhaps not, and we need to make sure
Because that gets into who has keys to your office, who else has access to your desk, because that's the part from a law enforcement perspective concerns me the most, is not when it's on the CHL holder's person, where is it when it's not on their person? So
how is it secured? Yes.
Hi. So I realize that no one in this room was the architect of the bill, but I have a question about the gun-free zones. Why is there a provision for that at all? If the intention is that this is going to make us safer by having more people with guns everywhere, then why are there any gun-free zones to be allowed?
It was a political compromise to get the bill passed.
that was a good answer.
So, yeah.
That's the correct answer.
I mean, it's a truthful answer too.
Hello. So from what we've seen of our incoming students, we know that dealing with anxiety and depression are like real issues for our students. And I could see that not for our CHL holders necessarily, but for just students on our campus generally, that this could increase their levels of insecurity or discomfort on our campus? Are we going to be increasing any access to mental health resources or our counseling support system and staff numbers just generally, so that way we can help out any residual feelings of anxiety?
I mean, she did this last night, and it was awesome. You might as well just stand up. You're just waiting on me. Come on.
Sorry.
Say it.
Hi, Mo McGinnis, Dean of Students. As you know, the CARE team exists and the Dean of Students office exists to help our students that are dealing with anxiety, dealing in crisis, threats to themselves, threats to others. That will continue. I do see probably our workload going up a little bit with the education piece, but also helping them understand and deal with the anxiety of that. It's not going to get better. And so we'll continue to do that. And like last night, it came up, and you could tell a woman was already having anxiety about it. So come see us. We'll talk you through it. We'll get you to counseling and testing. Maybe we put together a couple different workshops with counseling and testing about it, so that we're hitting the masses, and we go from there. But definitely part of our education that we'll continue to do.
Well, okay, so I'm an academic advisor, and I imagine one of the concerns that I've heard from other advisors across campus has been about this bill and whether advising offices, whether they will or will not be part of that gun-free zone, particularly because advising or having a student, you referenced it earlier, of having a student in your office that's talking to you about something that's going on with their education. It's certainly a very intimate setting where there's not a whole lot of access except to a lot of other offices and in the suites, as well as it's a very emotional time. And so I imagine some of the concern from some people across campus is, if I have somebody that I'm sitting with one-on-one and I'm not a CHL holder, I don't have one in my office, or we're not in a gun-free zone, that the student across from me, whether they're a CHL holder or not, may be upset by the fact that I tell them you can't graduate this semester. So I guess, what are some of the things, the parameters, as a question? That was first more of a comment, but as a question for members of the task force, what are some of the things that you are thinking of as putting together for the parameters of the gun-free zone?
We're actually taking input from y'all. So what you just said will go on the list of things. We have not sat around the table and brainstormed ideas of these need to be gun-free zones. And so that's what this consultative process is partially about, is to get the input from the university community of what they would like to see in the policy and the areas they would like to see gun-free. So now that you've said advising offices, that goes on to the list for consideration. We haven't established criteria to assess those, et cetera. And we heard some last night, like McConnell Hall, where the TAMP students live, and was it the third floor of, is it Austin Hall, the Chestnut Hall? I don't know why I want to call it Austin. I'm in Chilton, it's right there, but that one. Because that's where the mental health services are provided, and really we want to hear from y'all of those kind of ideas of where we should consider it to be gun-free. We have to take that, establish the criteria of how we're going to at least propose to the president what should be those gun-free zones, and then we have to be able to support them and justify and make sure they're not so broad that we, like I mentioned before, nullify the effect of the law or the intent of the law.
In regards to the gun-free zones, has there been any definition yet or discussion about what the term in the law about collegiate sporting events? I'm the director of the rec center, and
right. So it was on the slide, and I actually skipped it, and I probably shouldn't have, because it's the example I used last night. Because right now specifically, I don't know about since 1997, but at some point in time, the list of places in which a CHL holder cannot carry, just like I used to say, institutions of higher education, and that will be taken off the list August 1, 2016. It says collegiate sporting events. And it's my understanding that collegiate sporting events is basically during the event itself. So and again, Office of General Counsel is helping with some of these understanding the definitions. So it's not, like if you just take Apogee Stadium, for example, it's not Apogee Stadium 24/7, 365. It's Apogee Stadium when the football team is playing there. The other times it is not.
The law doesn't address just NCAA sporting events. It's collegiate. So is campus recreation events being considered by the task force? For example, intramural games, games on our basketball courts inside where competition gets heated.
Yeah, I think kind of what Eric said is we're going to have to get some guidance, some legal guidance on that, because the law does not define what a collegiate sporting event is. So we're going to need some guidance on that for sure.
Yeah,
and the whole states will be tackling that same issue.
Yes, and we've heard that as well as intramural sports or recreational sports is that collegiate. Right. It's college students participating in an event, and so we have to get that's a legal counsel issue basically. But it's on the list of things to address.
Yes, and a CHL holder doesn't have to identify themselves. My concern is, I'm with housing, that I think they need additional training on not laying that weapon down in what they consider their home, because they might have a roommate or something like that. So I'm not really concerned about the CHL holder, but that during their regular training, I know they know to keep, they're safe, they're gun locked up maybe, but in the dorm, are they going to get extra training to say, hey, even if you're just running to the restroom, don't lay that on your desk? Or that's my concern, I guess. I don't think
Well,
that's
a big
question.
portion of the CHL class, and again, I'm not a CHL holder, but I'm sure there's some in here, if you want to speak up, is about handgun storing and safety. So one of the comments that's been made is whether or not it would be appropriate to put a resident that has a handgun license in a single occupancy room. So that's one of the thoughts that we'll be looking at, because that's a comment's been made a couple of times.
But they don't have to identify themselves, so how do you know to do that?
We've asked the Office of General Counsel if we can, for housing only, ask.
Because
we
the law
don't have a response yet.
specifically says we can establish rules for housing.
Right, but
So-
when you're in your home, you're comfortable, and
Right.
you just lay that down to run to the restroom.
No, I totally get what
that's
you're saying.
my only
Right,
concern.
right,
Is someone
right.
else getting hold of it?
Yes.
Okay, my question kind of goes to both questions, actually. One is, if they're living on campus, and you talked about putting them in a private room, the bathroom that connects those private rooms do not lock. So the suite mate would still have access to that room if the other individual was, in class or whatever, and they didn't take their weapon with them, and they had it in their desk drawer or whatnot. So what would be done to remedy that? And then also the school sporting events and stuff, like football game at Apogee, would the gun-free zone also be the parking lot where tailgates taking place and drinking's taking place and stuff like that?
And again, we haven't established what those gun-free areas are yet. That's why we're having the meeting, so we can't probably elaborate on that because we don't have any idea what it'll end up be. To your question about storage in the residence hall, I think it's a good point. I think there'll have to be something that we'll need to do as part of our housing piece, and our subcommittee is look at what kind of training will be made available to CHL holders specific to your housing residence hall, because it's different than an apartment or house. So that's a good point.
And just of how other universities at other states that have tackled this challenge have dealt with it is they either have the central location, so it never enters the residence hall. They have this central location where the students in residence halls have to go and drop it off, or they put it and require it to be at all times inside that hotel safe, for lack of a better term, but everybody knows what those things look like. So when you enter your room, you can't put it in your desk drawer, you can't put it under your bed, you can't whatever. You have to put it and secure it in the hotel safe, and that's what other universities have done in other states. And as far as the tailgating, et cetera, another thing that we've asked for the Office of General Counsel to consider and assist us with is with the hundreds of events that we have on this campus each year, we need a mechanism for places to be deemed temporary gun-free zones. And I'm sure they'll assist with that and help us craft that language. So that area right there may be gun-free for 4 hours on a Friday night because some event has going on. And we have a procedure in that policy that whoever's coordinating that event has gone through to make it a temporary gun-free zone. We got to have the temporary signs up, et cetera. And so I think of tailgating in that sense. It's a temporary event. And so we want to have the ability and a procedure in place to identify temporary events as no guns allowed, as opposed to just, or in addition to, not as opposed, but in addition to buildings and offices in stagnant places. Yep.
Because I know some cities are tackling that because they have events in certain parks where alcohol is served. And they've actually got documentation from the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission that specifically says that location at the time is kind of like a bar. So there's so much alcohol here, there's no food, it's more like a bar, so you can treat it that way in terms of where you can't have a handgun. So if you're a CHO holder, you know that you can't carry it in the bar. So.
It's me again. This isn't a really well-formed question because it's kind of emotional response, but I wanted to go on the record. Hi, yeah, you can give it to Mo. That's funny. But when talking, just piggybacking off of areas of zones, whether it's a floor or an entire building, the thing that keeps popping up into my mind is all those babies that are in the child development lab where people bring their babies. And I know if it were my child, I wouldn't even want it on the second floor where someone could run up and grab it. So just, I wanted to go on record in case I forgot, I probably wouldn't likely forget, but if I don't remember to go back and add the feedback, just to say when you're considering that, sometimes a floor of a building would not make me feel safer if my small children are in it. So that's less of a question and more of a comment, just to go on the record for when you go back and watch this.
So we've heard child development lab, but just so make sure I understand your comment, you're talking about the entire building where the I don't know where the child development lab is, but
if you
is
were
that
to ask
Matthews
my
Hall?
opinion, yes, that's what I mean. I would
building,
want
got it.
that entire building
Okay.
before I brought my child to that child development lab to be cared for outside of my
Good.
care to be a gun-free zone, if it were me. So
And that's Matthews Hall, right?
I think
Is
it's
that where it is
Matthews.
at?
But
I think
when
it is.
discussing the zones, I just wanted to put it on the record that sometimes a floor may not be as effective or as make someone feel as safe as an entire building.
Okay. Can you, we gotta get you on a mic, so you're, this is,
I'm Darlene Callahan. I'm the Director of Space Management and Planning. The Child Development Lab, this has come up in our conversations, but just for everyone to know in this arena, the Child Development Lab will be moving out of Matthews Hall. They will open up in Mean Green Village Building B next August, and it will be only the Child Development Lab, and no other entity will be in that facility.
parents will probably be happy in the drop-off and pick-up stages, I'm sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm with the international office, and now we have the whole building of Marcus Hall, and I'd like to recommend too that to be a gun-free zone because we have so many students. We have students from 120 countries and visitors and delegations and all, and it's because of differences in languages and understanding. Perhaps people, we could have guns on campus, but they might not understand that it's only CHL holders, So I think for everybody's safety and understanding, I think it should be a gun-free zone too.
Okay.
That's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
If there's any definitive data on if gun-free zones actually deter active shooters, and if you guys have any of that information.
I'm not aware of any.
I'm not aware of any data that shows that gun-free zones are a deterrent to an active shooter. I think that there's not really empirical studies on active shooters. Most of it's anecdotal, so it's not really, scientific quantitative research. But if you just asked me, as a criminal justice professor, would gun-free zones deter an active shooter? No. No. I mean, nothing's going to deter an active shooter except this gentleman to my left. because that's their mindset, is to do as much damage and as much injury and death as possible. And so having a gun-free area is not going to stop that. And I mean, just as an example, you know, I believe it's federal law that all of our schools are gun-free zones, K through 12. So
look at some of the military bases.
Yeah, any active shooter that's occurred in a K through 12 school, it's a gun-free zone, but they've still occurred.
I honestly hate to do this, but I am a CHL holder. And I want to address...
It's like AA all of a
yeah,
sudden.
Yeah, it really is. It feels like that. And I had a couple of questions, but I want to address a few concerns. First, not only do I feel that I'm a law-abiding citizen, but if CHL holders commit a crime with their gun, it is a step above. So it is more significant than a normal crime for a CHL holder. We are looked upon as we are given responsibility, so the punishment is higher when we abuse that responsibility. So I want everybody to be aware of that. The second thing is, when the question about would we interfere in active shooter situations or anything like that, we are taught to be held responsible for anything that happens when we do that. So if accidentally someone else gets shot, we are liable for that. And it's not a case where the police get to say, oh, you didn't mean it, you get to go home. It's a grand jury. We have to go through that whole thing. So it is a process. We don't want to do that at all, because we obviously don't want to deal with law enforcement in the first place. We want to protect ourselves.
No offense to you.
So, no offense.
I thought I was
No
a nice
offense.
guy. You know?
No offense. But we don't want to do that. The other questions that I had were that, as far as I'm aware, currently CHL is allowed not in buildings, but still on campus as long as you are outside of a building. Is open carry going to be the same? As in, you can have an open carry outside of a building? No, it is the entire campus? Okay.
Except for
the sidewalks, areas around the buildings, parking lots will be concealed carry. Open carry will only apply on city streets.
Because we don't own the streets.
Yeah. The other comment that I had was in regards to, from a CHL holder standpoint, what I would be comfortable not being allowed to go into is any place that is a clinic or something that is a private business that the UNT kind of works with. Any places that have children, any places that have chemicals or explosive materials, I would also be comfortable not going in those. Limiting to those sections of the buildings is what I would prefer. If it had to be the entire building, I would understand.
And we heard the same comments last night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good point about labs that have chemicals in them we've heard last night.
Yeah, I'm not interested in making it any more dangerous than it has to be. I already understand that I'm carrying a gun. So I appreciate everything that y'all do and y'all's understanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I want to go on record and say I think the best way to stop a bad person with a gun is a good person with a gun. So I'm okay with concealed handgun licenses. My question is there going to be a expectation or obligation for us as staff if we see a gun? Because open carry is not allowed and concealed carry is by definition concealed. So if we see a gun, are we going to be expected to say, hey, you need to hide that better, or even report it?
I think the expectation would be that you call the police.
I mean, we have...
I mean, I certainly wouldn't advise you to confront that person. I would say just step out, call the police, and then we'll come deal with it.
And if it, you know, we mentioned it last night, but anytime somebody feels unsafe, they need to call the police first. But we also want to include in the policy kind of the reporting mechanism so that it's in there, this is what you should do if you see somebody that's in violation of this policy, which will probably be to call 911.
You had mentioned before that once the Board of Regents, I guess, agrees with the policy, and so that's the policy at that point in time. And it's on September 1 of every year, it has to go up for, I guess you send it into the state for justification, that kind of thing?
Every other year, yes.
Every other year. Does that mean that this could change on a every other year basis, or that it would, or is it just kind of justification at that point?
It is anything that we have on the gun-free zone list, for lack of a better term, but just so we all are using a common language, is going to have to go September 1, 2016, and then every other year to the legislature with the justifications for those areas. What they will do with that, I do not know. But we also, which may address part of your question, we also want in the policy, and have asked the Office of General Counsel to work with us on this, is we want the policy to be dynamic in the sense that it's not inked February 16 and then it's just there. Is that we're building new buildings on campus, parts of buildings that used to be used for purpose A now become purpose B, and we're adding programs, deleting programs, et cetera. And so we think there needs to be a procedure in place by policy that says if we want to add to the list of gun-free zones, this is the process in which we go through. And then it gets added to the list, and then next time it's legislative time, there may be 2 more locations on that list. I think that may have been what you were, all right.
Does the law address, or has there been any discussion about the youth camps and those of us that host youth camps all summer long throughout the year?
The law does not specifically address it, but we have, it's been noted that we need to consider the fact that we have minors on campus. And certainly I mentioned TAM students in McConnell Hall, but we also have these summer camps. Then how do you deal with that? And there's been at least discussion informally with members of the campus community of, the dormitories that they stay in need to be kind of the temporary gun-free zone. They get designated as gun-free locations for the time of the camp, et cetera. But and that's part of that, kind of getting to your comment, we realize that we just have hundreds and hundreds of events. And so we don't want to create a policy that's stagnant. We want to create one that meets our needs as our needs change throughout the year. And in the summertime, there's kids running all over this place. Not so much right now, except maybe environmental science building, Elm Fork type of place.
Right.
Yes.
This is just a quick follow-up comment to that there are, I think it gets really complicated because I think there are plenty of events throughout the year, recruiting events, events where people like Patrick Vasquez are bringing a lot of people to campus to just get an understanding of what a college campus looks like. True. Tons of groups of students that are going around talking to people from advisors to faculty, that a lot of them are minors. I see a lot of groups walking across campus.
No, good point. I was just interacting with a group coming back from class last Thursday. There was a group of kids, so I was kind of walking with them, hanging out with them and talking to them and stuff, and they were in 8th grade. So you're right. Good point.
Just wanted to ask, what peer institutions are you consulting with right now, or thinking about consulting with to assist in this?
Well, we're definitely monitoring what all institutions are doing. We are most closely aligned, obviously, with our sister campuses, UNT Dallas and the UNT Health Science Center, but we're also monitoring what's happening at really other large state institutions, so UT A&M, Texas Tech, University of Houston, UT San Antonio, those types of locations, to see what they're doing as well. It got quiet. So are we good? Are there any other questions? Okay, well, just a couple things before we depart. First, thank you for coming. We really value your input. That's why we're doing this. We want to hear what you have to say. But if if you're like me and strokes of genius come to you at a later time, remember our website. Share your thoughts through the forum, do the email, or come to the next staff one, whichever. But make sure you get your thoughts provided to us so your voice is heard as well. But thank you for coming. We'll keep you updated via our website as we keep doing our work, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.